Welcome to WTF, West Bank Talks Finance, the podcast that turns WTF moments into knowledge that you can use to make informed financial decisions. Subscribe to get notifications when we release new episodes. Hi, I'm Lebo Gaoaketse and I look after marketing and comms for West Bank. Today we are talking spotting a car scams, essentially. And in studio today, we've got Dion Sagathevan, who is the business unit head for our NATIS department. Welcome, Dion.
Thank you, Lebs.
And we've got Wendy Knowler,
Hi,
consumer
Lebs.
journalist. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Now, an interesting topic today. I've personally been scammed. Story for another day.
Ooh. You sure?
But not a car scam.
Okay.
And Wendy, I'm going to start with you because I'm sure you receive a lot of these things and you get asked about it quite a lot. What are the key things or what are the things that you need to look out for when you're buying a car? I mean, they always say that if it swims like a duck and it looks like a duck, chances are it is a duck.
Yeah.
But is it that obvious with car scams?
I think it is. Obviously, I would have spent many, many years in this field of consumer journalism and fielded many, many, many complaints from consumers who have been caught by various scams. And I would say, not all scam related, but I would say probably between cell phones and cars, they make up the bulk of the complaints that come to me. And the car ones are particularly difficult for me to get a nice, happy ending on for various reasons. I would say, though, with the, when I started 25 years ago, people weren't buying cars online, right? So I've certainly seen over the years an increase in the number of scams, the number of people who certainly choose to come to me and ask for help, very limited help. Mostly I could just use their story to warn others as to how not to go wrong. So I think the first one is price.
Sure.
So people, I don't have to explain too much what sort of economy we're in, and people are always looking for a bargain, and that makes them vulnerable, especially when one presents itself online. They're looking at grabbing this good deal, and that in most cases suspends common sense, and they're not doing due diligence. They're not protecting their interests. They're just wanting that lovely look of lovely looking
deal.
car at that price, and so that makes them extremely vulnerable to all sorts of scams because they're not doing their checks. So it's whether it's an auction scam, whether it's a car that doesn't, well, in that case it is a car that doesn't exist, but they use other modus operandis around to kind of get people to pay for something that doesn't exist, or it's a code 3 that was built up and now being sold as an ordinary code 2 used car on a dealership floor somewhere. Lots and lots of ways. Then there's no service book, so you can't trace, and the people just take the word for it. And in many cases, literally within the first 2 days, it comes to light that this car is a complete dud, and now then there's refund, what CPA, and so it goes. So and even if it's an unbelievably ridiculous price for that particular car, it's still a lot of money, right, for somebody. So the losses are huge, and they go from a bad situation of only being able to afford a cheap car to now definitely back to taxis and out of pocket paying back relatives that they may have borrowed the money from, or banks or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a whole world out
loans. Yeah, and it's very frustrating for those of us who feel the complaints to not be able to really help them.
Sure.
Because the
hands are
scamster's in the
tied.
wind, thrown away that SIM card, and off he or she
Off
goes.
they go. And I mean, I've just said it's a whole world out there. Dion, closer to you in the auction space, what are the kinds of things that happen in that space in as far as scams are concerned? I'm sure you are much closer to when the process starts before it becomes a complaint that goes to Wendy. Do you want to maybe share there?
If it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. And in the auction space, there's lots of modus operandi. It varies from criminals fronting as staff members where they visit our premises, pose as staff members, intimidate some of our existing customers, and they make offers which is unreasonable. And there are telling signs to see those type of things when the terms and conditions are not met, where promises are made, where vehicles can be withdrawn out of the auction, when cash offers are presented. These are all the signs that says something is untoward here.
Interesting, and I mean we'll touch more on the signs later on. Wendy, what is the first thing? Dion is talking about red flags. There's certain things that happen, things that are obvious, not so obvious, as I call them. If it's too good to be true, chances are it is. What do I then do, as somebody who's trying to, let's say, buy a car on auction?
Okay.
What are the things that I can do to protect myself upfront before I fall into this trap?
So there are two answers. That the first one would be whether you genuinely want to buy a car on auction or whether you're just Googling and trying to find yourself a set of wheels at a really good price. And those are the complaints that I usually get. So a first-time car buyer is particularly vulnerable because they have no idea how the process works, right? So this car is advertised, photos of it, it looks great, all angles, because the fraudster's gone onto an auction floor, for example, and snapped the images, or even more creatively, and I'll leave Dion to explain those. But so they don't know, first of all, that if a car is repossessed, so what will happen is the fraudster will say, this car is about to be auctioned, but, I am allowed to take it off the auction and sell it privately at a good price because, cars don't fetch all that much on auction anyway, but, we can pull it off, but you need to act fast, you need to pay this deposit. So first of all, cars that have been repossessed by banks, there is a legal procedure for what then happens. There's no way a car can be pulled off an auction and sold privately. That's not how the banks operate. So the person would need to know that, and that's why we do these awareness things, so that people know. And secondly, cash payments, legitimate businesses, motor dealerships, auction houses can't just accept cash into their bank account. There needs to be FICA on boarding and that kind of thing, which takes time. And then being rushed to pay the deposit. Legitimate businesses, they don't put that high pressure. That's the hallmark of a con, is when there's a high pressure to to put on you to pay and pay quickly. But they will say things like, there are 3 other people interested. If you don't pay now, you're going to lose this car.
So they work on that emotion.
They work on that emotion, and of course, if you're under pressure, you're less likely to think rationally, and that's so they pay the money. And then, of course, if the car doesn't materialize and they can't get hold of the person, and then they will go to the auction house, let's say Westbank, because this is a Westbank endeavour, and then Westbank has to say, I'm terribly sorry, that's not how we operated, that's never how we operate, you've been scammed.
Yeah, very
and
important.
The modus operandi of the cases I've dealt with are pretty much all that.
Auctions.
And those sort of, when it comes to auctions, it's that, and the sad also commonality is that the person just has absolutely no idea how things ought to work, and that applies to scams of all kinds. People just don't understand, like buying clothes online or whatever, what the sites should have legally, what the site should look like. So they don't know when it's not there, and when someone has gone completely rogue, and they don't know, hang on, a legitimate business would never operate like this, up until the point they don't get what they paid for. Then they're like, something's wrong.
Something
and
is
then,
fishy here.
And sometimes they don't want to accept it. I don't know if you have this. They go into denial because the reality of losing a large amount of money is unbearable. So it sometimes does take some time to convince them.
You're right.
That I'm so sorry to give you bad news, because I'm supposed to be the fixer, right? I'm supposed to make things right. And then I have to say, I can't.
It's embarrassing, Wendy. I mean,
Yeah.
let me tell you that much. With my own personal story, it was not a lot of money, but coming out as somebody who's supposedly knowledgeable to say that you've been scammed. So there is a part of it that's embarrassing. I can see how somebody would not readily say, "I've been scammed" or accept it
It's
easily.
denial.
Yeah, it is denial. Because the auction space is so likely vulnerable to the scams, rather, Dion. And Wendy talked about credibility. There's terms and conditions. There's a process. I just maybe want us to take a few minutes to highlight how that process would look like, so we at least educate somebody who's listening, somebody who's watching, for the things that they need to look out for when they go to a credible auction, should that be the option.
I think I would like to answer the two ways. So, from a consumer point of view, it's important to do your homework. Spend the effort that you understand the terms and conditions on what you're doing. From a bank's point of view, we are governed by compliance, and we practice with a set of rules. That rules are available on our websites. So spend the time looking at the rules, understanding the rules. Ask if you need clarity on the rules. When it comes to inspecting the vehicle, ask for the service books, look at the VIN number, phone the dealership, do your homework that gives you some sort of credibility on on letting your money go.
Research.
The other thing is they clone the sites as well. So, like reputable businesses. I had many cases involving the Motors Group. And then, so it's important to look at the URL as well if you're online.
Agree.
And you'll see subtle variances from the genuine company.
Let's talk about that, Wendy. That's a very interesting one because
Sorry to butt into.
the type of ones that we receive look like they're legitimate websites, look like they're legitimate
all the scam
Facebook
ones.
pages or social media pages, colors,
Everything
CI
is just
brand
stolen.
looks good. And you say check the
URL. So
what does that mean to an ordinary consumer?
okay, so that's the address. It's the website address. You click
Okay.
on the right hand side, and it will give you the full address, and you can then compare it to the genuine one.
Okay.
Do some more googling, and you will see that there's a subtle difference. So that's the number one thing to do, whether you're looking to buy a car or anything else, clothing, or all the major high-end shoe brands of all, the fraudsters have cloned all of them as well. So that is the first thing to do, because it'll be very subtly different, just one letter added or removed. And so, our brains overlook that.
True.
But in this instance, you really need to start there to know that you're on the genuine
So it's the
site.
small things. It's
Yeah,
a
because
Wendy with
once
a-
you're on the fake site, they can amend the terms and conditions and say, on occasion, we will choose to remove a car from auction.
Agree, yeah.
And, then you might think, oh, well, this is all legitimate. And I think the problem is with the cloned website.
So I guess criminals, it's a sleight hand of misdirecting you.
Misdirection's a good word.
So if any site misdirects you to a different site, and you see
That's
that
a
direction movement, that's a
sign.
sign that, that's how magicians
That's
work.
a sign.
Yes, exactly.
It's about directing you to their site and taking control of that whole journey.
Or small things. West Bank versus West Bank, I suppose, in some instances.
I'd like to think people would notice that difference, but if it's within the context of the logo and everything else, as I say, your brain just adjusts. Sometimes you see that text where they've taken out every third or fourth letter, but your brain compensates and reads it perfectly normally, and that's, I think, what these scammers rely on. They're changing subtle things in the hope that you won't notice, and many people don't.
Sure. Dion, you spoke about price. That if it's too good to be true, chances are it is. Does West Bank, as an example, do we have disclosure? It could be West Bank, could be anybody else who's running an auction. Do we have an indication of the right prices or what the price range should be that maybe people can check? I'm a first-time car buyer and I want to go for auctions. How do I know? Is there a price range? Is there some sense check in terms of price?
So in terms of the price, we are guided by the M&M codes.
Okay.
That's a guide of trade and retail. That's what you can expect for a vehicle of a a decent quality. That's what the guidelines should be. And thereafter, it's based on the condition of the vehicle. So in the real world, if a vehicle trades at 100,000 Rand and you look at all the defects that goes with the vehicles, that starts bringing the value of the vehicle down. And that's what you can expect to pay. Just remember, with the auction, it's whoever places the highest bid.
Absolutely.
And it meets the requirements in terms of the bank's policy.
And Wendy, if you're not buying at an auction, let's say you're buying a pre-loved, they call them used cars.
Don't come with that term. Can't handle it.
If you buy a car that's been used before or a second-hand
car, yeah.
And it's not at an auction,
yes.
How different would that process be in terms of the price, the regulation, and all of those things? When you walk into a dealership and you're buying a used car, what are the things that you need to look out for so that you're not scammed?
Okay, well, how long have you got? There's two scenarios. There's buying off a dealership floor, walking in, face-to-face situation, and then there's people buying online. And I'm very strongly against the latter. I've certainly find a car online, but go and at least send someone that you know very well and trust. See the car, drive the car. It amazes me, Lebo, how many people don't drive a car before they buy it.
Sure.
And they wonder what could possibly go wrong.
We live in the world of convenience.
This is what I'm saying. So convenience costs across whatever sphere you're talking about. Even if you're buying a chopped up onion or pumpkin versus one, as it came out of the ground kind of thing, you're going to pay more, right, for the packaging and the convenience of not. So people open themselves up to being scammed or shortchanged or ripped off in some way if they're going to always go for the quickest option. So I could talk about car finance, but let's talk about the cars themselves. I mean, I'm a proponent of get your own quotes, source your own finance. But we'll get to that. So for the car itself, the first thing I would say is never buy a car without paying the extra to have an independent
assessor,
technical assessment, DECRA, that kind of thing done, because the cost of not doing it is huge. And if the dealership doesn't want that done, we'll see that as a red flag and walk away. So that would be the first thing. If you don't want to do that, there are telltale signs. Don't buy the car at night.
In
winter it's easy because the light is fading early, right?
Sure.
Especially in the Cape where I'm from.
That is something that is easily overlooked. Don't buy a car at night.
Often people will do that, and they say it's after hours, but you want the car. You can't see properly. You can't see the overspray
and the dents,
or the hail damage on the roof or whatever. So I would say always don't inspect a car. Certainly don't sign a deal for a car until you've had a chance to look at it in good light and to drive it. And drive it on the freeway, because often the salespeople will make sure you just go on the nice suburban roads. Yeah. But the problem, the shudder on the wheels that shows you that the chassis is really not great, will happen at 100 plus kilometers. So if someone is dissuading you from taking the car on the open road, that's another red flag. If the pedals, are worn beyond what the advertised mileage is suggesting, that's another thing. Look for misaligned panels. I mean, this sounds quite technical, but it really isn't.
No, it isn't.
It's not that technical.
Are these things, readily obvious to the eye when you inspect?
Yes, they are actually.
Okay.
They are.
So I can walk into a dealership and I can ask for these things, or I can test drive the car and see these things.
If nothing else, it's going to make the salespeople just a little bit wary of you. I always say, especially as a woman, I did 15 years of motoring journalism, so I
these things.
Like, I would just teach them some basic car technology so that, or terminology rather, so that people would think, okay, you talk about, it's interesting, the B pillar and the positioning of that, you talk about that, and you talk about, has this car had a haircut, which means has the mileage been
taken down?
Yeah, because it doesn't look the car looks
older than the mileage
suggests. If that person's clever, they might not actually they just know that trouble's coming, that kind of thing. yeah, you can look inside the engine, the well of the engine. If
And
there's
you're well within your rights to ask them to open the bonnet,
please,
right?
you absolutely should. If there's more oil on the one side, one wall than on the other, that's classic indication that that whole section's been replaced. As I say, it's not hard. You just
Sure.
have to do a little bit of Googling and get these things. And what I would certainly do is get the car, as much of the car history as I can, beforehand. There's vindocs.co.za. I've done these checks myself. 300
Legitimate.
as a journalist in doing an investigation, 300 and something rand I think I paid at BMW, and it actually said this car's was in an accident on this date, and the it cost 200 and some whatever thousand to repair. Now that's not a fender bender, right?
Sure.
But this was withheld from the person until she tried to trade it in, and then she took it to the branded dealer, and they said no. They came because they did the checks. But sometimes when the dealer is selling the car, they'll just go, well, we didn't know that there was a previous accident damage, and then the question is, but you could have known. So I always say, just do it for yourself. Spend that extra few hundred. There's so much you can actually do to avoid
falling into those traps.
So you could, with some cars, the information you give the VIN, you can go to the branded dealer and they will look up and say, this car was last serviced, it's missed 2 service intervals.
1902.
Exactly. But the thing is, you've got to take the time to do it.
Rather spend that time than
Absolutely,
pay the
before.
hefty cost at a later
Because
stage.
let me tell you, people go into sleuth mode afterwards.
Sure.
When there's no...
They're not available.
No, the convenience doesn't come into it. Now they'll spend endless time, energy, money, whatever,
the situation.
trying to get recourse.
Yeah.
When if
They
they
could
put
have
that
been
energy in
prevented.
before,
Yeah.
I don't mean to victim bash, but it frustrates me that they don't apply that diligence.
Spend that time.
At the right time, up front, to spare them all the drama later. So never be in too much of a hurry is what I would say.
Patience. Take your time.
Take your time.
Do the right thing up
Because,
front.
if you're rushed, if you either rushed by a salesperson or you're rushing yourself because you really want that nice vehicle, the chances of something going amiss are great.
And Dion, Wendy spoke about a credible sort of assessor. I think you mentioned DECRA earlier on. In as far as the auction space is concerned, I mean, she's just given us a whole list of red flags and things to look out for. What are the things that are done before that car goes on the auction floor to make sure that it is not a car that's, that's not good enough? Or do we then disclose? What are the things that we do before that car goes on the floor?
So from an auction perspective, all information has to be disclosed that the bank may have known, so that information would be available.
And where is it made available? I'm a consumer.
So when the vehicle is
interested.
advertised, there would be a comments column which says the vehicle mixing oil and water, or there's some noises,
Was in an
whatever
accident
it may be, was an
before.
accident. But I think just to Wendy's points early on, there's some things which is basic, which you need to do your homework. Ask for the paperwork. Look at the latest document and look at the VIN number compared to the vehicle itself. So you verify in the paperwork that the paperwork is matching the asset. Look at the engine number. And if you're unable to view the engine number, ask somebody to give you the engine number versus what's there. Because the common practice is the engines are normally changed and the paperwork is never corrected.
And you sit with that problem when you tried
That's right.
sell.
And sometimes the vehicle coding may be different, where it's a used vehicle, where it's a new vehicle, where it's a built-up vehicle, where it's a stolen and recovered vehicle. So get the VIN number, verify it with the manufacturer. What's also an important point is looking at the date of first registration. The date of first registration just means that the vehicle was introduced into the e-native system. That doesn't mean that's the date of manufacture.
It's a good tip
I
that
can
I've given before.
Yeah, I can see how anyone can fall into that trap. So the date first registered could be, let's say, 2024.
Yes.
But it was manufactured 2022.
Yeah.
or
Sure.
earlier.
Or earlier.
The reason that these checks, I mean, they're important when you're buying any used car, but in an auction, remember, you can't drive the car.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much footstoots. You don't have the CPA protection of the 6 months warranty from date of purchase.
That's important. Can we touch maybe more on that? Yeah, Wendy. Very
Yeah,
important.
so when you buy a car from a dealership of any kind, where the person is in the business of selling cars, you automatically get the 6 months Consumer Protection Act. It's called an implied warranty, meaning you have it whether the retailer knows it or likes it or not, right? I won't get into the specifics. It works slightly differently with cars and with other retail goods, but you have the 6 month warranty, and it's the golden warranty, and that's why I see in my work the dealerships will stall until the 6
So they
months.
buy time,
It's the golden
essentially.
period, that first 6 months. However, if you buy a car privately, so it's a private sale, the person that's selling to you is not a dealer, or if you buy a car on auction, that Section 56 of the CPA, the implied warranty, does not apply.
Does not apply. Sorry.
So I always say, if you're going to buy a car in an auction, you either must be a fundi, have some experience in the trade, or be someone who, like Dion says, is willing to put in the time and the effort to do all those checks, to check the numbers, to do all of that.
Or maybe it's the first
before
time
you put your hand up to bid for the car.
Or maybe it's a first time car buyer. Go with somebody who knows.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't recommend it for a first time
First-time buyer.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also from a first time buyer, there's some telling signs. So the vehicle was probably standing on the auction floor. When approaching the vehicle, look at misalignment of panels. Look at overspray. Feel the
Yes, that's a good-
panels. You'll
Can
pick up
feel it.
Yeah, you'll see discoloration of mismatch of paintwork. That's a sign.
And what does that mean?
So the red, for example, the color red, it's not consistent on the whole vehicle. The one is
Not
lighter.
the original. It's like
Yeah.
a painting the walls of your house.
So that could
You
be
never
a
get a
telling
complete
sign.
match.
Yeah, that could be a
Yes.
telling sign of but there were illegitimate repairs done on this car that could not have been disclosed.
Well, a fender bend is one thing, but if it was a major accident that that is now dramatically affecting the integrity of a car, or certainly the value of the car, when you now go to trade and they will do the checks, they will find out about the accident, and you'll get a much lower price than you would had the car not been in that accident. So it's really important to know because oftentimes the repairs aren't that great because they're trying to shave the costs down to resell, and then looking and touching your weapons, your defense really against landing up with a problem car, because remember, you can't take it back.
Yes.
And you can't drive it first, so you have to do everything else other than driving the car to make sure you're not going to land up with some purchase you're going to really regret.
Sorry, Wendy, what is a fender bender? Just for the
So
interest of people who are listening or watching.
So often people will say, it's the number one question every buyer of a used car will say, other than checking out the mileage, they'll say, has this car been in an accident? And either the dealer will say no, or they will say, yes, but it was just, a fender bender is a little, we've
Minor.
all had minor thing. The headlight had to be replaced, or the bumper had to be
Nothing hectic.
No, and we can all deal with that because we've all done that in our time, right? And it's like, it's fine. It's the major ones that cause major problems for you of all kinds. But so the trade, when they come across as honest, yes, there was, but it's very minor, and it was fixed easily, and that's not going to affect the value
So
of
a
the
car
car.
that's been in a serious accident with serious damages can be passed off as a fender bender.
That's what
Nothing
often
hectic.
happens. It
Okay.
often happens because you've now sort of have a bit of trust, because you think, oh well, they've admitted now that there was an issue, but often it's not a sign of honesty; it's a sign of dishonesty, in that they're saying it was really minor, nothing to worry about, when in fact it was extremely.
Sure.
If you'd actually seen pictures of the car post-accident, you wouldn't have in your wildest
Be
dreams
shocked.
have wanted to have anything to do with that car. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
interesting.
cosmetically looks okay, but
But-
not under the skin, not so much.
Dion, you spoke about, sorry, you want to maybe add on
just
there,
to your
Dion?
point. So also, you have service books that's available, and now with the new cars, there's onboard computers,
Yeah.
so you can verify the mileage
Very good advice.
versus the service book, and you know the consumer 30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Look at the model. Try and do your calculation. What
numbers.
the estimate mileage should be.
After a certain period of
Yeah.
time.
Look at the tire wear. Look at the pedals. Look at the wear on the steering.
Steering is the other one, yeah.
Look at the gear knob. It's those telling signs will tell you something is untoward. Yeah.
Fishy.
Also,
Yeah.
sometimes the logos start to fade on some cars,
Which is telling of how long the
yeah.
car's been around for.
Also, that it might have been sitting in searing sun,
for
its
a
whole
long
life.
time.
Yeah.
Sure.
Especially in the auction, there's
Yes.
a period where it's kept in storage.
Yeah.
Not always undercover.
Yeah.
Mostly not.
There's a lot of, when people are buying these cars, Wendy and Dion, I mean, any one of you can field this one. There's a lot of information exchange. A list of, we need your ID, we need your proof of income, this, that, and the other. Now, I obviously go into the zone of, if I'm a consumer and there's a high chance of being scammed, is my personal information just not as vulnerable? What else can they do? And as a consumer, how do I protect myself maybe and my personal information from such incidences? Okay.
So I think from a bank point of view, we are governed by ensuring that we verify our customers and ensure that information is kept safe.
And we look after that information. And when did you want to add? I mean, how do you experience it on your end?
So the POPI Act, Protection of Personal Information Act, requires anybody that's asking consumers to give over their personal information, they're required to safeguard in certain ways. Obviously. And we as consumers in this country, in overseas, consumers feel nothing, like many European countries, to say, show me, demand to know what procedures those
Are being
companies have.
followed, okay.
In this country, not so much. I mean, you arrive at a residential complex, a business complex, they ask you for your driver's license, and you just hand it over. Nobody asks, when are you going to, what are you going to do? Or when are you going to destroy those records? I mean, you can get a lot of information off a driver's license, right? And we should be getting to a point where we naturally, whenever we're asked to hand over something, ask, well, what are you going to do with it? That's the first thing. Secondly, the sad truth is that thanks to a number of disastrous and massive data breaches involving some of our biggest
Corporates.
and credit bureaus, for example, not only them but many, whether we like it or know it or not, all of us that are credit active, our records are out there on the dark web, right? So the fraudsters, so they can still open an account in your name, but so that's why you need to get alerts and that kind of thing to know when it's not you. In terms of getting into our bank accounts, though, they need to get our PINs and whatever, and that's why we have phishing, where they phone you and try and trick you into reading out the one-time PIN that your bank sends you, and all that kind of thing. It still doesn't mean, though, that we shouldn't worry about where our personal information, our 3 months bank statements and our employer information. We don't want to, create more risk for ourselves, and that's one of the reasons why I say, do your own, source your own finance, source your own quotes, because then you're going directly to a West Bank or whatever the case may be.
And your information is not lying around.
And it's not lying in a dealership, or the dealerships are not, some are highly ethical, some not so much. Those are the ones I hear about. And you don't have any guarantee that what is happening with that. That is a starter kit for an ID impersonation that you've just handed over there. And also that way you can interrogate your own interest rates and all the rest, I think. But again, it takes time and effort. And you're sitting with an F&I, a finance and insurance consultant on a dealership floor, who says, I'll do it for you. And the average person will go, fine.
For sure.
And then they say, this is the lowest. And then, so I think there are a number of reasons why I say, unless it's an F&I that you know and trust and have done deals with before, I would say there's
direct.
with the privacy of the security rather of your information is another reason why you should engage directly with the financial institutions who, as Dion has said, have their procedures in place. Compliance is huge, as opposed to using an intermediary who may or may not be mindful about the need to protect your personal information. And there could actually be, in some really dodgy dealerships, that could actually be actively passing on your information to accomplices.
Interesting, Wendy. You talk about sourcing your own finance. And I mean, that's what Westbank advocates for. Sourcing your own finance, and our Fast app tool helps you to do exactly that.
Perfect.
Earlier on you spoke, and I'm going to come back to you, but I want to go to Dion. You spoke about the fact that you don't necessarily prefer the online option in terms of buying a car.
I do, to the extent that it allows one to do a investigation online rather than you don't have to visit dealerships, so you can go onto a Auto Trader or Cars.co.za, credible one, and have all these cars on sale at your fingertips, and you can choose your brand and your mileage and your price and whatever else. But from that point, engage with the car directly in real life and drive it. I can never sit here in good conscience as a consumer journalist and a former motoring journalist and say, you shouldn't drive the car unless you have someone you know and trust that is an absolute fundi, and they live in Johannesburg while you're in Cape Town or Durban, and they go and drive the car on your behalf. There's some security implications there as well, but then you feel comfortable. But to just see a car advertised online, sign the paperwork, and then make arrangements to get that car later, it's madness, as far as
Look,
I'm concerned.
I certainly know if I have to buy a used car in Cape Town and I'm in Joburg, I know who I'm going to send to check it out for me. Dion, online auctions, are they any more vulnerable to scams as opposed to me physically walking into an auction house?
I guess it works hand in hand with what Wendy's saying. The online auction makes it convenience. You are less intimidated. You can do this on convenience, sitting in the evening, enjoying your cup of coffee and going through the vehicles and seeing what's available out there. You can compare much more easier. You can see what the brands are going.
And you're not under pressure. There's
You're not
nobody
under pressure.
saying deposit here now, gone tomorrow.
And you can't drive the car anyway, so that's out of the picture. But you can't then look at it properly either.
But at least you've gone through the process.
Yes.
Less intimidation. You understand what you're getting into. Then the critical phase comes where you have to go and physically see the vehicle. And I cannot agree with you more.
Yep.
See the vehicle. Don't just blind buy a vehicle, which is, Photoshop can do so much things to vehicles.
Touch it, feel
which is
it.
unreal, yeah. So go and view the vehicle. Take somebody with you. Ask for help. There'll probably be somebody on the floor that can give you some guidance. Ask those awkward questions. Why is this light brighter than this one? Or
yeah, that's a good one.
Certainly more time. It's a time thing. When do you want to add to that?
I just want to say that in my experience, women are far more likely to, operating in the car space, buying, to ask someone to come with them. Because they don't assume they know it all, but I would say, I'm generalizing and I apologize for that.
That's an interesting
But
one.
I would say it's more likely that a man would not ask for
that Jane
help
too's got it all figured out.
because he's got it all figured out. And women don't really have an issue asking because, they accept that they don't have it all figured out, perhaps.
Now, I've said that I've been scammed. I didn't divulge the details, but it was one of those online Forex, blah, 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 blah.
Sorry.
I fell into it. Yeah, I did it. You guys can judge me later.
It's
It's
school
fine.
fees.
It's school fees.
Yeah. But you know what? If you have been scammed, I always say to people, from where I sit, everyone's going to get scammed sooner or later. But the thing is, you've lost the money, but share to help others.
Well, I can share now, and I can laugh about it now.
Embarrassing.
But it was initially embarrassing.
Do you know what? The people that are most liable or at risk of falling for a scam are those that think they're too clever and they never will.
Apparently.
Yep, there's research on this.
Like myself.
Yep. So that's the thing, is to not think that you're invincible, because the person that catches you in the right way on the right day, when things are a little bit amiss for you, for whatever reason, you're in a hurry, you're down, you're whatever, they will catch you. Sooner or later, we will
all
just about all of us will
it.
fall for some kind of scam, big or small.
Have you been scammed, Wendy? That was going to be
I
my
was
question.
just waiting. I haven't. I haven't yet. I should say that. I'm not
Touch
going
wood.
to be, even I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say I know it all because I give advice on this stuff. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. On the wrong day, in the wrong way,
your guard is
in a way that
down.
I'm, for a product or a service that I'm vulnerable around. So
I mean, we are also in a tough economy where people are looking for
Yes.
good deals, good buys.
Exactly. I was about to go on air to do one of my 702 shows. I was literally waiting for the news to finish, and I got this SMS. So always check your SMSs, because we might be on WhatsApp with our mates and our colleagues, but if your bank or financial institution wants to get a hold of you about something urgent, it's going to be on an SMS, right? And I got this SMS that said, "Are you opening Knowler opening an account at Sheet Street?" And they had all my information from my credit record, and even the numbers that were old. So they had my current address, but my old work number, and that's why I knew. So I'm saying our details are out there. We've just got to know that sooner or later someone's going to try.
Sure. If you're not being scammed, someone's going to try with your personal information.
Yeah, impersonation
recreate.
fraud is massive problem.
Complete-
And I don't want to go take this
Another topic,
podcast.
yeah.
Yes, but I'm just saying, you talked about photoshopping. Well, with AI, we can have our voices impersonated. We can, our
A
imagery.
whole new level
It's a
could
whole
be
new world. So our
created.
level of awareness and diligence and just deep suspicion for everything needs to ramp up.
And apart from stealing your personal information, what's starting to pick up now is the stealing of the vehicle information, the cloning.
Yes, thanks
Cloning.
for mentioning that.
And cloning of vehicles means they're stealing the identity of this vehicle, and there's two
attach it.
vehicles
Similar.
running with the same
Yeah.
ID.
Yeah.
And this goes for criminal activities involving crime.
So they use maybe a few steps back.
They
Cloning.
can't trace it to them.
Cloning.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like what you're raising, but a few steps back. I've got a car, registration number, VIN, chassis. Are we then saying that that same car as is can be cloned, copied elsewhere?
The car's identity.
Everything,
Yeah.
one-on-one, one for one.
Just like personal identity being
Okay,
cloned. Yeah.
so another car can be cloned that looks like mine and then be used for
Yeah.
interesting
in
criminal
your name,
activities.
because
In
the
my
car's registered to you.
name. In
Yeah.
my-
So speeding fines would be the least of it. It could
The
be.
least of it.
Yeah.
It's the criminal activities
Yeah.
that's critical. The vehicle can be involved in a crime.
Yeah.
There can be other incidents of which is more severe, and then speeding tickets.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
God for no
normally
e-tolls.
that's normally the first indication the person will get a speeding fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting topic.
That's not theirs. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, just maybe in closing, as I think it's quite important, of course, that we do research. You've spoken about the difference in online auctions and all of those wonderful things. You've not been scammed as yet. Actually, Dion,
We
your
didn't
turn.
ask.
Have you been scammed before I
I'm
close?
too proud to mention it.
We'll take that as a yes. We won't ask details.
Yeah,
It
no.
shouldn't be prized, what I'm saying. If we
It's
talk
sensitive.
yeah, well, and I get those ones as well. And I mean, a lot of people are victims of romance scams. And
Sure.
I, when we talk about it on air, I say we would not entertain any callers
Yeah.
who start victim blaming, because you might not never fall for a romance scam, but there's another form of scam that you are very likely to fall victim to, whether you acknowledge it or not. And not acknowledging it makes you more susceptible to falling for it. So I don't think there should be no shame Having said, people must do their due diligence and all of that. It's just that I think you're unlikely to be caught a second time right now because your wariness factor is ramped up. And so I just say share it. You don't have to do it on a live platform, but share it with people. Use what you lost as to get something positive to warn other people.
And I mean, based on that, Wendy, you said that you've been at this for 25 years, of course, in different ways, forms, as a journalist, as a motoring journalist. And
no, I've been doing consumer full time for 25 years, non-stop.
Years. Yeah. And I mean, how has this space of scams evolved over the years?
Oh gosh. Well, let me tell you, when we're in a banking environment here, when I first started in 1998, I used to go to seminars on check fraud and then tell my readers how to avoid check fraud. You don't use like a felt tip pen kind of thing because the ink penetrates deeper. Don't leave gaps and that kind of thing. I mean, that was
dates
before,
can be changed.
Yeah, now we're in internet banking. We're sort of social media. We've got the internet, and I think the biggest problem when it comes to scams is that it's made life easier for us, but it's made life an awful lot easier for the scammers as well to pretend to be who and what they're not. And too many people are too trusting of what's sitting on the screen in front of them. So they may not go down to a dodgy little car dealership in a bad part of town because they don't, that's not who they are, and they know that probably won't end well. But they can look at a website that's a clone or that's just, pretending to be something.
Or they can be an employee.
Exactly. And they trust. They trust without doing the checks. And that's my, so much of what I do is telling people how to protect themselves against scammers. I mean, if you talk to the banking ombudsman, Ombudsman for Banking Services, to give it its full name, the percentage of cases that they deal with across, whether it's ATM, home loans, internet, whatever, I think they're up to something like 70% of the cases involve some form of fraud, where the complainant is now trying to get the bank to
pay them
back. And, that's a very tricky area because if the bank can't be found to have done anything wrong, then
they can't pay you. They're not liable.
They're not liable, and so it becomes,
very emotional and
Yes.
sticky.
So fraud, scams, I've seen a huge uptick because technology enables it. And now we're going into a whole new era with AI, which frankly does scare me a lot.
Sure.
Really, because I've been done to a lot of journalists. What if somebody did it to me and had me punting a certain kind of business or saying, really online auctions is the way to go and I recommend this site, which is a scammer.
Sure.
And you can't get it brought down, so that's, it's a huge concern. But they always tells though. They never get it exactly right. So knowing the person and what they would say and what they would look and their mannerisms and whatever.
Like Lebo wouldn't ask you for money from nowhere,
exactly. Or, there's certain tells. If there was an AI generated version of you talking, the people that know you the best and have studied you for years would instantly know something's off. So again, knowledge is power, and research and doing your homework.
Yeah, because Dion did say that, the first thing that they check out for in auctions is when something looks slightly different to
instinctively
the ordinary.
It's off. Your subconscious actually gets it quite quickly. You've got to just trust it.
As a consumer, AI is constantly learning. And that's why it's evolving to such an extent that we can't keep up.
Sure.
And criminals are constantly learning.
Oh, yeah.
And they're moving their way of doing their activity. And as a consumer, we should also be constantly moving and learning.
Well said. Exactly
so
that.
Evolving as
exactly
well.
That.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
if you're credit active, you owe it to yourself to
constantly evolve.
Get information, be clued up, Google, latest forms of fraud. Read your financial institutions' warnings and advices
Go
and
on
case
our
studies.
website.
It's
Go
all
on our
there.
social media platforms.
You just need to take the time to do it. And there's much pride, I would say, in being clued up and being the one that people ask,
Sure.
is this legit, whatever, because you're the one that's taken the time to kind of get clued up about the latest modus operandi. And it's really needs to be done every month, not every year or every 6 months. Every month, things
because
change.
they are advancing themselves on the other side of the...
Because then there's awareness around one particular modus operandi, and then now they have to find another way, or the banks close down that weakness in the system, and now they've got to pivot and find something else, some other way in, other way to part us from our money.
Interesting. And as we close, I asked this question to all our guests.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes on a lift with somebody who is buying a car, whether it's for the first time, hopefully the first time. What is the one piece of advice, Dion, that you would give to that person? That golden nugget, that one thing that you have to tell them in 2 minutes as the lift goes up or down, whichever way.
I think for me, do your homework.
Okay.
Use credible sources, reputable companies, Westbank, preferably. And if anything is too good to be true,
chances are it is. Okay. And Wendy?
That lift only made it halfway up. 2 minutes. Everything, what Dion said. And yes, I would say, I always say hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So assume as you go into any deal, no matter how shiny the dealership floor looks or how great the website or whatever looks, just assume it's a scam. It's just a little mental,
worst.
just even if it looks reputable, as I say. So check the URL, check that you're with the company that you think you are, and at every step, be clued up about what could possibly go wrong, how it's supposed to happen. Because if you don't know how it's supposed to happen legitimately, you're not going to know when you're being scammed. And then just check everything. So everything we've said before about, check the car's identity, all those numbers, engine, chassis, registration, everything. Go to source where you can get that information, VIN-docs, etc.
Do the homework.
Just spend that time.
Yeah.
Set aside hours. I mean, how long are you going to have that car, ideally, and how much are you going to be paying for it every month? It is really worth the investment of time.
Well, thank you. As we close, just key things in terms of scams, no matter how they've evolved over the years, whether you buy a car on auction, whether you walk into a second-hand dealership, it is quite important to be mindful of red flags. That's the first thing. Do your homework. We cannot emphasize. Take the time that you need to do your desktop research, find those cars, do your comparisons. The amount is one other thing that you need to look out for. If it is too good to be true, chances are it really, really is. And I think for me, the most important one, it's all fair and well to do the research. Go to the dealership. Look at the car, the physical car. Get into it, drive it. Feel it, the scratches and the dents. Do not fall for a fender bender, as Wendy said. It's been great. Beautiful chat. Very insightful. Lebo. Even I learned.
I learned too. Thank you, Dion.
And thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Dion. Thanks,
Pleasure.
Wendy. Hope to chat again soon.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm keen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope that you found that useful. Now go and subscribe to be notified when our next informative episode is available.